In this video, Jordan Peterson explains the proper way of listening and how you can have an effective argument with people.
You can try this. This is an excellent, I'm not going to tell you many specific psychological exercises, but this is a really good one. It's hard too. Real communication occurs and the evaluative tendency avoided when we listen with understanding. So the Rogers' theory is difficult to understand with regards to the relationship between evaluation and unconditional positive regard. Because he tends to speak as if evaluation is bad. But really what he means is hierarchical evaluation, which is you're worse than me or I'm better than you. It's like those things might even be true in any given case, but they're not relevant to what we're doing. Right? We're trying to do something other than that. So when that creeps in, I think of that as dominance hierarchy maneuvering. That happens all the time when people are talking, They're just maneuvering around in a dominance hierarchy. They're not trying to communicate. So that's the evaluative tendency. What does this mean? It means to see the expressed idea and attitude from the other person's point of view, to sense how it feels to him, to achieve his frame of reference in regard to the thing he is talking about. Stated so briefly, this may sound absurdly simple, but it is not. It's an approach which we have found extremely potent in the field of psychotherapy. It's the most effective agent we know for altering the basic personality structure of an individual and improving his relationships and his communications with others. That's quite the statement, The most effective agent we know for altering the basic personality structure of an individual. If I can listen to what he tells me, if I can understand how it seems to him, if I can see its personal meaning for him, if I can sense the emotional flavor which it has for him, then I will be releasing potent forces of change in him. If I can really understand how he hates his father or the university or communists, if I can catch the flavor of his fear of insanity or his fear of atom bombs or of Russia, it will be of the greatest help to him in altering those very hatreds and fears and in establishing realistic and harmonious relationships with the very people and situations toward which he has felt hatred and fear. We know from our research, and by the way, Rogers was one of the first clinicians who empirically evaluated the outcome of psychotherapy. And so he actually more or less established the idea that therapy outcomes should be measured scientifically. And in doing that, in some sense, he set down one element of the standards by which modern clinical psychologists are actually trained and practiced, because the modern clinical psychologist is a scientist practitioner. So the idea is that you should be trained as a researcher and as a practitioner, and that's quite unique. Doctors, medical doctors, for example, are not trained that way, although you could make a very strong case that they should be. We know from our research that such empathic understanding with a person, not about him, is such an effective approach that it can bring about major changes in personality. Now, some of you may be feeling that you listen well to people and that you've never seen such results. The chances are very great indeed that your listening has not been of the type I have described. Fortunately, I can suggest a little laboratory experiment which you can try to test the quality of your understanding. The next time you get into an argument with your wife, or your friend, or with a small group of friends, just stop the discussion for a moment, and for an experiment, institute this rule. Each person can only speak up for himself once he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately, and to that speaker's satisfaction. Now that's the annoying part, right? Because if you're in an argument, you're going to use all sorts of rhetorical devices in order to win. And one of the most obvious of those rhetorical devices is that you make your case, and I only half listen because I'm formulating what I'm going to say to you next, and then I impose a bias in my processing of your argument, and so that what I address when I talk to you is the sort of argument that you'd make if you were weak and stupid and contemptible. And then I go after that, and that's basically a straw man approach, right? I take your position, and I try to make it into the scrawniest little rattiest thing I can possibly manage, illustrating that it needs to be rubbed out, and then I rub it out. It's like the Rogerian approach is actually exactly the opposite. And by the way, it's the approach that Dostoevsky took to his characters when he wrote his great novels, and it's also the approach that all great novelists take to their character. Because if you're a great novelist, you put yourself inside the head of the murderer. right? And Dostoevsky was great at that. So in Crime and Punishment, for example, the main character, Raskolnikov, is a law student, and he's all obsessed because he's lost his faith in God. And he's got all these weird ideas that emerged in Europe at the end of the 1800s, that if there's no God, everything is permitted. And so he's thinking, well, am I moral just because I'm a coward? Which was a Nietzschean proposition. Actually, Nietzsche said most morality is cowardice. He didn't say that morality was cowardice. He said most of the time when people are being cowardly, they pretend that's moral, which is absolutely right. Anyways, he's wrestling with this idea that, oh, morality is just cowardice, and that once fundamental beliefs have disappeared, you can do anything you want, and the only thing that's there to stop you is your own fear. So that's rattling around the back of his head. Now, at the same time, he's more or less starving to death. And his sister is going to essentially prostitute herself to raise enough money so that he can stay in law school. Now, it's not exactly that. She's going to go off and marry this guy that she doesn't love who's quite rich. And she's going to do that to keep him in law school. So that sort of sucks. You know, he's not very happy about that. And then he's living in this horrible flop house. And the woman who runs it is, Dostoevsky sets this up quite nicely. She's the sort of person that if she was run over by a horse cart, everyone would be pleased. She's grasping and miserly and horrible and mean and malevolent and cruel and all those things. And then to make it even worse, she has this niece who isn't very bright that she basically treats as a slave and tortures and orders around all the time. And then she has all these people who are living in her building, which she doesn't take care of, and she's just grasping money out of them all the time. And she doesn't do anything with money, she just puts it in a little chest. And she lives like on breadcrumbs and, you know, dust. And so Dostoevsky's very careful to set this situation up. It's like, okay, is there such a thing as right or wrong? Well, in Raskolnikov, he's pretty puzzled about that. Plus, he's hungry, and he's drinking too much, and you know, he doesn't eat properly. Well, that's why he's hungry. So his head is a little on the addled side. And then he's got this terrible moral conundrum. It's like there's this horrible woman, and she's torturing her niece, and then his sister's going to go into a loveless marriage, and he can't stay in law school. And so he rationalizes. He says, oh, here's a solution, man. I'll just get rid of that old woman. No one's going to miss her, man. I'll be doing the world a favor by getting rid of her. And then I'll take her money, and then my sister doesn't have to become a prostitute, roughly speaking, and I get to go to law school, and I'm going to be a good guy, and so, poof, perfect. And if there's no ultimate right and wrong, then I'm set. It's an instrumental argument, right? Well, so he kills her. Well, and you have to read the book if you want the rest of the story. Suffice it to say that things do not go exactly as he predicted. So the first thing he figures out is that the person you are before you hit someone with an axe and the person you are immediately after you hit someone with an axe are not the same persons. So, you know, he assumes constancy of identity across every experience. That turns out to be seriously wrong. So